Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, everyone listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show across the world. It is Thursday, January the 30th, the penultimate day of impeachment. I think it'll be over tomorrow. Maybe Saturday, but it'll be over tomorrow. That is not, however, the lead story. The lead story is coronavirus. The latest statistics this morning. Brought to you from the New York Times. By Thursday, quoting the Times here, the number of confirmed cases of the new coronavirus had risen to 7,711 worldwide, according to Chinese officials and the World Health Organization. All but 68 of those infections have been in mainland China. 38 more deaths in China from the coronavirus were announced on Thursday, bringing the toll to 170. It's 170 out of 7,000, 400 basically. One person died in southwestern province of Sichuan. Another 1,737 new cases were recorded in the past 24 hours. Containment, not so much. China's National Health Commission on Sunday said that the virus was contagious even in its incubation period, which lasted up to 14 days. So you understand, you can get it, and you're contagious for 14 days. The new study by Chinese scientists has suggested the period between exposure to the coronavirus, and symptoms could be as long as 5.2 days. It varied among patients. The team studied the first 425 people infected with the new coronavirus, and their findings support a 14-day observation period for people who might have been exposed. So you can be contagious for 14 days. You can be asymptomatic for at least 5, and it's spreading wildly in China. Now to the South China Morning Post. This is where you go for the good stuff, right? They are way ahead of the curve, much later in the day over there. It's 4:30 in the afternoon in South China right now, where the Morning Post, it's a Hong Kong newspaper, comes out. Public health experts say the WHO needs to declare the coronavirus outbreak in the Chinese city of Wuhan a global emergency, as Beijing itself locks down cities containing more than 50 million people in the world's biggest ever national response to an infectious disease crisis. The call comes as the World Health Organization is set to reconvene its emergency committee in Geneva later on Thursday, the third time in a week, to assess whether the new virus spreading from China now constitutes a public health emergency of international concern, or a PHEIC, P-H-E-I-C, PHEIC. The pneumonia-like illness has killed 170 people and sickened more than 7,000 in China so far, with dozens more cases, 68 to be specific, confirmed elsewhere, including in the U.S., Japan, Thailand, and Germany. The 16 independent experts on the WHO's emergency committee will advise Director General of the WHO on the decision and give recommendations for managing the outbreak. Tedros, who is the WHO's Director General, met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing earlier this week to discuss the situation. The WHO twice last week decided to hold off from declaring a public health emergency, saying it was too soon, raising concern among experts that the virus could get beyond control if swift action was not taken. Go read Kurt Schlichter's brand new column in Town Hall. He quotes me saying this could be Katrina, and it could, no matter how much you do after the fact. If you don't do everything at the front end, you get blamed at the back end. You do not want to be behind the curve on a epidemic. Hitoshi Oshitani, a former regional advisor on communicable disease surveillance and response at the WHO's Western Pacific office, said there was an imminent risk of a global outbreak. I think the WHO should have declared a public health emergency of international concern earlier. They are supposed to declare PHEIC based on the risk of international spread. There's already significant risk of international spread. 1 week ago, said Oshitani, who is now with the Department of Virology on the Tohoku University Graduate School of Medicine in Japan. Oshitani said it was more difficult to control the new coronavirus than it was the SARS during the 2002-2003 outbreak, because patients were likely to be contagious even before they had symptoms, meaning the measures currently being taken might not be enough to stop the infection from spreading. You got 7,801 cases on mainland China and 170 deaths. 10 cases in Hong Kong, 7 in Macau, 8 in Taiwan, 57 in the rest of Asia, 10 in Europe, 8 in North America, 7 in Australia, 4 in the rest of the world. South America is clear. Africa largely spared. That's the news on coronavirus. What's the news on impeachment? We're over, and done. Looks like Mitch got the vote to shut this thing down. They're asking more boring questions of the poor Chief Justice who gives them to the poor lawyers, and everyone is poorly served and everyone is tired. But markets are not tired. Lots of market updates to you today brought by Andrew and Todd.com. What's the best indicator of global worries? The 10-year Treasury. When the world gets worried, it throws all of its money into the government bond account because the American government bond is the place that's safest. The return on the American government bond is down to 1.59% for the 10-year Treasury. You're only going to get 1.59% over 10 years if you buy a 10-year bond right now. That's because there's so many people want to buy the bond, the demand's gone down. If you go to andrewandtodd.com and give them your information, just answer a couple of questions. They'll tell you it's time to refinance your house. If it's time to refinance your house, they won't tell you to do that unless it makes sense. But boy, it's going to make sense. With a 10-year Treasury at 1.59%, rates have got to be in the mid, maybe even the low threes. I don't check them. That's their job. Or you can call Andrew and Todd. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you the money. You can call them at 888-888-1172. Not good on the market this morning. Why? Well, overseas. The Japanese index is down 1.72%. The Hong Kong index is down another 2.62%. Hong Kong has gotten slaughtered this week. They're down about 6%. England's down 0.66%. Germany down about 1%. Yesterday, the Dow eked out an 11-point gain. The NASDAQ was up 5. The S&P was down 2. Mixed market. Futures this morning in the U.S. all red. S&P down 19, the NASDAQ down 50, the Dow down 159. Again, this is coronavirus fears. Does China have a handle on it? Does anyone have a handle on it? Where are they going to put these people? 14 days? You get it for 14 days, but you're asymptomatic and contagious for 5 days at least? Trouble. And so you just got to wrap them up and lock them down. I'm watching people in Riverside County, California. I'm watching the Fox News business channel. People getting off the plane in Riverside, nobody's rushing to hug them. Dwayne, I thought you'd be out there to greet them. Everyone who's out there in Riverside's got the suits on. They've been traveling for 2-3 days. You know what you like when you travel for 2 or 3 days? It's not fun. And when you go for 2 or 3 days and then you're met by people in white suits and hats and paper gloves, it's just not fun. So they're going to go into a barracks or someplace like that out at the old March Air Force Base, and they're going to be quarantined. And the only people who are happy are people who are buying a house, people who are refinancing a house, getting money out of a house because interest rates are so low. Call Andrew and Todd today, 888-888-1172. The Telegraph has provided a handy-dandy guide to the symptoms of coronavirus. All right? Feeling tired, difficulty breathing, a high temperature, a cough, or sore throat. That does not really help. That actually describes Dwayne every day.
I was going to say, that's Thursday.
That's Thursday. Feeling tired, difficulty breathing, high temperature, cough, or sore throat. Then they ask, have you traveled in the last 2 weeks to a high-risk area? Well, I've been in Drayton's studio, but no. 2, have you been in contact with someone else who has? How do we know? They don't tell us where patient Orange County and patient LA went because they're not responding the right way. How quickly do symptoms emerge? There's some evidence that the virus can be spread by asymptomatic people. We don't know. When should I seek medical help? It depends if you've been to Wuhan. Look, hand hygiene is most important. Avoid shaking hands. No more kiss a piece at church, et cetera, et cetera. Now to the impeachment after the break. I brought you up to speed on coronavirus. The impeachment needs to get out of the way of this story. They got to start I'm bringing on experts today on the coronavirus. I'm going to have on Dr. Amesh Adalja from the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, Emily Baumgaertner, medical reporter from the LA Times, many other people. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Makes me think of Joe Biden. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Joe Biden, this is his music. Keep the music playing and let us hear cut number 23.
That's like just flat out acknowledging we've been doing everything we can do to keep Biden from being the nominee, and guess what? We tried it in Iraq. It's not working, so now we're going to try, in Iran, excuse me. We tried in Ukraine.
Not really sure what he's talking about. Keep playing it. Let's talk about Joe Biden, cut number 17.
This is the United States of America. We're all walking around with our heads down, like, woe or us. What's the matter?
Cut number 16.
And it looks like the students don't have a seat, but thanks for being here. And if you need any notes for your professors in your class that you missed, let me know. My wife is a community college professor, and she says the best kept secret, hey, fellas, good to see you. I wish I had seen you when you present the colors. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Folks, look, you know that old expression.
Never got the best.
God made man.
Joe's back in town. Joe Biden, our favorite candidate. Joe Biden, cut number 11, a montage from Vice on Joe. Cut number 11.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm running for President of the United States. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other person.
Over those 8 years, there were 3 million people that were deported and separated from their families. Yeah. We had this classification of families.
You should go to John.
Families.
You should go to John.
I'm not going to do that.
What are we going to do about climate change? Now, you say you're against pipelines, but then you want to replace these gas lines. That's not going to work. We got to stop building and replacing pipelines. You have to go vote for somebody else.
Well, I tell you what, if you look at my record and you still doubt about my commitment, then you should vote for somebody else. I'd love to make sure we can't use any oil or gas, period, now. Is it possible?
Yes.
Well, you ought to vote for somebody else. Well, I knew you weren't, man. You think I thought you'd stand up and vote for me? You're too old to vote for me. All right, there you go.
There's a montage of Joe Biden telling people to vote for somebody else. You got to love it. A little bit of John Bolton, call with Zelensky, August of 2019, cut number 14.
Well, I will be meeting President Zelensky. He and President Trump have already spoken twice. President called to congratulate President Zelensky on his election and then on his success in the parliamentary election. They were very warm and cordial calls. We're hoping that they'll be able to meet in Warsaw and have a few minutes together.
And then finally, Patrick Philbin. By the way, there's going to be an MVP trophy for the best lawyer involved in impeachment. I think it goes to Deputy White House Counsel Pat Philbin. Calm, persuasive, direct, compelling. Here's that Deputy Counsel Patrick Philbin yesterday, cut 15.
I think this is one of the most important issues that this body faces, given these calls to have witnesses, because the House managers try to present it as if it's just a simple question, how can you have a trial without witnesses? But in real litigation, no one goes to trial without doing discovery. No one goes to trial without having heard from the witnesses first. You don't show up at trial and then start trying to call witnesses for the first time. And the implications here in our constitutional structure for trying to run things in such an upside-down way would be very grave for this body as an institution. Because as the senator's question points out, it largely prevents this chamber from getting other business done as long as there is a trial pending. And the idea that the House can do an incomplete job in trying to find out what witnesses there are, having them come testify, trying to find out the facts, just rush something through and bring it here as an impeachment, and then start trying to call all the witnesses, means that this body will end up taking over that investigatory task.
And that is a bad thing. Patrick Philbin making the most important point. That which gets rewarded gets repeated. This has been a travesty. It should be over tomorrow. Thank God. And then they can get back to doing the people's business. Come right back. The Hugh Hewitt Show continues. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's been 9 days since I wrote anything for the Washington Post because nothing's really changed in impeachment. It's been 7 days since Matt Continetti wrote anything in the Washington Free Beacon about impeachment. I suspect for the same reason. Matt joins me now. Mr. Continetti, how are you this Thursday morning?
I'm well, Hugh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming back. Am I right? The reason that we are bereft of a new Continetti column on impeachment is because, well, nothing much has changed?
No, nothing much has changed. Obviously, the big story was John Bolton at the beginning of the week, but it seems, to me at least, that the Senate Republicans have weathered that storm. And so I think we're basically where we were at the end of last week. You're right, nothing much has changed.
So I have a fun question, then a serious question. If we hand out the MVP lawyer trophy at the end of this, when the acquittal comes in, I think tomorrow, maybe Saturday, who would you give it to?
I like Philbin.
So you and I are agreed. We are both agreed on Philbin.
I think he's the one. I saw Molly Hemingway had a Twitter poll, and everyone liked Philbin on that, too. So it's not that original choice by me, but I think he's done the best job. I think Cipollone's done a great job, too.
Well, generally speaking, how about on their team? Who do you like on their team?
Well, I think, I was going to say Jeffries, but it seems, actually I should say Jeffries, because it seems like his answer on the question of why the House didn't charge specific crimes really disappointed Susan Collins. So I'm going to have to say, that's good. Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Jeffries.
Yeah, I was going to say the best one I only saw snippets of the Dems because I just can't watch Adam Schiff anymore. Honestly, it's like being forced to watch the worst movie you've ever seen again and again and again and again. Was Zoe on the first day that they presented. I thought she did the best. I haven't seen much of her since then. Long-term impact, if any, on the presidency, Matt Continetti?
Well, I think the long-term impact, Hugh, is going to be the ongoing criminalization of politics. I mean, this is a trend that started before Donald Trump ever came down that escalator, and it seems as though it's becoming more acute during his presidency. I mean, with the whole FBI scandal, now with the impeachment shenanigans, I think whoever the next president is, whenever we have another president, this trend will probably continue. And so, I'm a little bit concerned about the Democrats are, as the Wall Street Journal editorial page put it, defining impeachment down. If you really get to the level of a policy decision you disagree with is impeachable, I do think that has some poses some problems for the presidency and also for the legitimacy of Congress.
Let's salute the late James Q. Wilson, who I believe coined the term defining deviancy down.
Correct.
And so now defining impeachment down is exactly what I was worried about in the Washington Post 9 days ago, and I think we have done that. I think a couple of second-order impacts, Matt Continetti, are, number one, when you arrive at the White House, you fire everyone in the National Security Council if it's a change of party. I mean everyone. Number two, if you are a change of party, you fire everybody at the FBI. And I think this is unfortunate. It's never been the rule before, but it occurs to me at the end of this. I don't know that a new president has any choice. What do you think?
Well, on the National Security Council, I think you make a great point. And I recall the stories during the second Obama term about how greatly the Obama administration expanded the National Security Council staff. I think it was up to over 300 people at one point.
Yep.
And what that seemed to have done was produce a kind of permanent national security bureaucracy within the White House that clearly was waiting, in some cases, for Donald Trump. And I recall even when he was inaugurated, there was like high-profile resignations, or not of high-profile individuals, but of people who made a big show of their, resigning. I can't work for this man, And of course, they were just partisan Democrats who had been kind of staffed in and wanted to make a display of their distaste for the current president. FBI, I mean, there might not be anybody left there by the time we have another president, so they might not need to take your advice.
Well, I definitely would not allow holdover deputy attorney generals to serve as the acting attorney general. I mean, I will change a lot in the next transition based upon the 100 Years' War that we've been fighting here against Donald Trump's surprise and stunning win. Let's turn, if we can, for a moment to coronavirus, Matt, because it does seem to me, I began the show with a half hour of coronavirus news. It is far more significant a story than a foregone conclusion in the Senate. Whether that comes on Saturday or next week or in 3 weeks, it's a foregone conclusion. He's not going to be removed. Coronavirus is not a foregone conclusion. I don't even know if we have our arms around it yet. What's your assessment of it?
I think this comes at absolutely the worst time for Xi Jinping, the leader of China. You know, he's been rocked by the protests in Hong Kong. He's been rocked by the landslide vote for the candidate in Taiwan, President Tsai, who's anti-China. He's been rocked by all these revelations about the prison camp system in Xinjiang province. He lost face to Donald Trump in the Phase 1 trade deal. And now he has this huge public health emergency, which is really also revealing to the world the limitations and corruptions of the communist bureaucracy that rules China. So this is a crisis, I think, of Chernobyl-level proportions for the Chinese Communist Party, and I have to say, I don't know if they're going to be able to handle it well.
Are you worried about the international implications and specifically those in the United States?
I'm always one to say, you know what, a little bit of panic can do good. So I was that way during Ebola. I'm that way during coronavirus. I wouldn't have a problem with the travel. We already have a travel ban in place for many countries. We might temporarily extend it to China just so we can put a clamp down on the spread of this virus, which we don't quite understand. I mean, I think that's my takeaway from the reading of just the coverage of the outbreak is that not everyone really knows what it does or where it comes from, and so we should kind of lean toward a caution until the public health officials, who are very good, by the way. It's like one of the one parts of our government that works well, I think, is the CDC and NIH, until they have an idea of what exactly is going on.
I call your attention to a column by Kurt Schlichter in townhall.com this morning where Kurt quotes me in a comment that I made yesterday. It could be Trump's Katrina if he is seen not to have responded effectively early. And I saw yesterday they posted pictures of the president being briefed in the Situation Room. I also am reading the South China Morning Post, which is a very, very good newspaper and has been for years, on the rather chilling and disturbing fact that you can remain asymptomatic but contagious for more than 5 days, and it can take 14 days to be symptomatic at all, so that 5.5 days may grow larger. Meanwhile, the world continues to move around on ships, planes, automobiles, and trains. What do you think Trump ought to be doing, if anything, that he hasn't done thus far, Matt Continetti?
Well, I think he needs to listen to some of the calls by Senators Cotton and Hawley for this type of ban that would suspend flights to China. Some airlines are already doing that. This reminds me a little bit, Hugh, of the 737 MAX issue, where you have a problem that emerges. The crisis, it takes a few days to kind of understand the magnitude of the crisis, but at the end of the day, Trump did the right thing, which is to say, take those planes out of the air. I think he's going to do the right thing here, too.
The Hang Seng is down 5% in 2 days, and we had a relief rally, and we've got a couple of good earnings reports, and Amazon might report today good earnings. Microsoft did last night. So our market might have the delayed impact on it, but boy, they're getting hammered in Asia. And it just seems to me that an ounce of prevention here will be worth quite a lot going forward. Matt, talk to me one last subject. Mike Pompeo's in Great Britain today to pound the table quietly and behind closed doors with Boris Johnson, who's received terrible advice. He's punting away his goodwill relationship with the special relationship by embracing Huawei. What is going through his mind?
I can't make sense of it, Hugh. I mean, to get Brexit through and to secure your independence from the EU, only to turn around and invite the Chinese security systems into your 5G network is, to me, baffling. I only think of one possible rationale is that the technology has just not been developed on the Western side, and we don't have an alternative that we were able to present to the Europeans and to Great Britain. But even so, I mean, wait a while. Wait until we got it, because allowing Huawei in, I think, poses serious national security risk. And then, of course, it also jeopardizes the whole Five Eyes agreement, right? I mean,
it does. On this program yesterday, the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, and I always have to disclose he's a dear friend, said, if we have to, we'll go back to carrier pigeons and handcuffs briefcase to arms. But we're not going to use a Y-way constructed system. And it's like, they've got a better railroad for a second. That railroad also happens to be a spy vehicle, so we're not going to build that railroad until we develop our own railroad. This is not hard. I really do not understand their punting away the goodwill and applause they had in the United States and our willingness to enter into a trade agreement for the benefit of a little bit of speed with China. And the arrogance with which they announce it. Oh, we know what we're doing and you don't, Americans. Wow.
That's some of that old kind of British attitude toward the ugly American there.
Yep.
That's a big issue and a big problem for Boris Johnson.
All right, exit question, Matt Continetti. On Monday, will this be behind us, the impeachment?
I think impeachment likely will be over by Monday. But you never know if we have another, because of course they're modeling this after Kavanaugh, Hugh. So you never know if there's going to be another, a bombshell or a scandalous story that will appear in the print just to kind of scare Republican senators and delay the whole inevitable conclusion another day.
I hope you are wrong, but you might be right. We will be talking again next week. Matt Continetti, founding editor of the Washington Free Beacon. Follow him on Twitter at Continetti. Let me check the markets, brought to you by Birch Gold Group. You can find Birch Gold Group at hughgold.com. Never a better time to buy some gold. They only sell bulk gold in increments of $5,000 or more. They can help you diversify your portfolio, though, by moving part of your IRA into a precious metals-backed IRA. They can give you a free information kit on converting your eligible IRA or 401k into a precious metals IRA at hughgold.com. You can also get their phone number, 800-434-GOLD. That's 800-434-GOLD, and buy $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 worth of gold. Put it in your safety deposit box. Don't keep it at home. Where is gold this morning? Well, it's up, of course. $1,580 an ounce. If you'd listened to me a month ago, you'd have been making about 20% right now. Because gold has been going up, up, up as coronavirus fears have gone up, up, up. Gold is always the reserve currency for panic and for concern, and there is real panic and concern. I guarantee you no one is selling gold in China willingly. So if you want to load up on some gold, go to hughgold.com. Now, yesterday the Dow had a little 11-point rise. The NASDAQ was up 5.5 points. The S&P was up 2.84. Facebook earnings disappointed. It's down $16 in pre-market trading. All right. Apple is even down $3 in pre-market trading. They had good earnings. Boeing, not yet reporting, nothing on Amazon, but I will tell you this, it's time to get into gold. HughGold.com, HughGold.com. Also time for ReliefFactor.com. There it is. Got it in my package. Open up, would you? What is wrong with it? Dwayne came in. I think Dwayne glued my Relief Factor bag together. There it is. It opened up. And my 4 pills, which I take every morning. Got to go to physical therapy today. Always a pleasant experience. Not. And 4 pills. Carrion, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, the 4 natural supplements that support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. You cannot miss the bag on the shelf. Arizona, North Carolina blue, lined in beautiful lime green. You take it every day. 3-week trial pack in $19.95. Pete and Seth Talbot are the people who began it. They also began Honor Bound Coffee. Honor Bound Coffee. Go to both of them. Go to both. Get your ReliefFactor.com. Get your pills. Get your coffee from Honor Bound Coffee. Serve military families. And get back here after the break. We will assess the Middle East peace plan with Michael Oren from Israel. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy minister in the Netanyahu government 2 governments ago, author of a spectacular new essay in The Atlantic, The Many Holocausts, which I've tweeted out. But this morning I want to talk to Dr. Oren about the Middle East peace plan, which was released. He has long urged it be released. It has finally been released. Dr. Oren, good morning. What do you think?
Good morning, Hugh. I think many things. First of all, a personal note. I've been following this process since I was a young advisor to Yitzhak Rabin back in the early 90s. So I have perspective. And I will tell you, without reservation, this is the only peace plan I have seen in all those years that actually reflects reality. All the other peace plans were wishful thinking. Yeah, the Palestinians are going to have a government that's actually going to be elected and is going to be uncorrupt. I mean, Abu Mazen is now in the 16th year of his 4-year term. And Palestinian leaders have stolen billions of dollars in foreign aid and millions of dollars of American aid from their own people. I mean, who's going to run this country? Who's going to defend the country? We're going to give the Palestinians the right to the ability to defend themselves and defend us? They'll fall apart in a day. So there's all this wishful thinking that Israel was going to rip up the homes of tens of thousands of Israelis, that we would redivide Jerusalem. Really, fantasy. This is the one agreement that is actually grounded in reality. And it's a tough reality, but a reality. And that is why the Arab states, for the first time, Bahrain, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and we hope the Saudis will be on board with this.
It seemed to me that Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and at least one other, maybe Oman, were at least modestly warm. UAE, Bahrain, very supportive. And that does put considerable pressure on the Palestinians, does it not, to at least counteroffer?
No, they won't. Listen, they have not come to the negotiating table since the British, for the first time, offered them a 2-state solution in 1937. The UN, 1947, Bill Clinton, George Bush. Who didn't offer them a 2-state solution? 8 years under the most pro-Palestinian president of all time, Barack Obama, nothing, never came to negotiate. They walked away. So they're not going to come to this one either. But does it matter that much if the Saudis are on board, the Arab world is on board, and the majority of Israelis have embraced this plan, left, right, up and down? It's amazing. So this is a tremendous opportunity, I believe, and I hope we can move on it.
What does that mean, Michael Oren? Move on it. Does that mean annex those portions which are called to be annexed in the plan, concede those portions which are called to be conceded, and call for investment in the Palestinian Authority on the scale that is provided for in the Trump plan?
Well, I would recommend that Israel holds off on annexing right now. And I was glad to see that we actually are doing that, apparently under some urging from the Trump administration. We are doing it because we want to get the Saudis on board first. Why chase them away? And once the Saudis are on board, we can get that $50 billion in investment in the Palestinian society, as well as in Jordan and Egypt, and get everyone to buy in, show that there actually is a dividend of peace. And, then we could begin the process of actually, building a Palestinian state. It's not what the Palestinians want territorially. It's not what they want in terms of the extent of their sovereignty. There's a price to be paid for saying no for about the last 90 years. And maybe they can get themselves a genuinely elected and uncorrupt leadership. So that's a process that begins first between Israel and the Arab world.
So two-part question, Michael Oren. Is Trump's peace plan a win for him, and is it a win for Netanyahu in the elections that loom in March?
Well, it gave Netanyahu a little bit of a bump in the polls. He went up 1 seat. Now he's either 1 or 2 seats behind Benny Gantz. At the end of the day, it doesn't really going to matter much because the actual size of the bloc, the right-wing blocks and the center-left blocks have remained exactly the same. It's a dead heat. As for whether it helps President Trump, I think you're a better expert of that than I am. I would have preferred a different timing of the rollout. But there's never an ideal timing for this. I don't want anybody to distract or anything to detract from the quality of the actual plan, which is many, many pages long, serious work. And I must say I've had a certain role in it going through, and I'm proud of what's come out of it.
181 pages. Are there any flashpoints, any particular neighborhoods, any settlements that go one way or the other that might derail an otherwise calm assessment of its value, its merits?
Well, I think there's a provision there for a territorial swap. Now, this is interesting, Hugh. No one's ever talked about the concessions Israel made in this. Everyone's saying, it's pro-Israel, pro-Israel. Israel made some very important concessions. Palestinian state, virtually everybody in the Israeli political spectrum, certainly from center-right, is against the Palestinian state, and Israel agreed to it. But Israel also agreed to the notion of territorial swaps. This was an Obama-era notion that in return for annexing parts of the West Bank that were heavily populated by Israelis, Israel would give up parts of sovereign Israel to the Palestinians. And Israel never agreed to this. This, for the first time, has been agreed on. It's in this agreement, and it includes the provision, or the transfer, if you will, of large segments of territory to the Palestinians in the southern Negev desert along the Egyptian border. So that's an extraordinary concession on the part of Israel. It's a major incentive for the Palestinians. It may prove controversial here.
But it is a beginning. Dr. Michael Oren, follow him on Twitter at Dr. Michael Oren. Follow me, America. In the next hour, we'll continue the conversation on coronavirus, the impending acquittal of Donald Trump, and much, much more. Stay tuned to The Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Thank you for joining me. Coronavirus week 2. No, I'm not leading with impeachment. Impeachment will be over by the weekend. It appears as though there will not be witnesses. It appears as though everyone's sick to death of this. The questions yesterday indicate a lot of boredom on the part of the senators. There is no case. There is no impeachable offense. I go back to the transcript, what I've said from day one. There isn't an offense there, much less an impeachable offense. They develop no evidence. They're desperate, grasping for straws. Nothing there. Over and done with. Coronavirus, by contrast, is a real story and an alarming one. Quote, a new study by Chinese scientists has suggested the period between exposure to the coronavirus and symptoms could be as long as 5.2 days, and that it warned its patients that it can be contagious during that period of time. The team, as according to findings published in the New England Journal of Medicine, studied the first 425 people infected with the new coronavirus, and their findings supported a 14-day observation period for people who have been exposed to it. Now, we just had land at March Air Force Base in Riverside, California, a plane load of Americans who are very happy to be back in the U.S., evacuated from Wuhan via Fairbanks, and they've been monitored all the way along. So they got 2 days, 4 days, 6 days, 8 of monitoring, but it's a 14-day incubation period. So that would suggest 14 days of observation of the last person they came in contact with. And better a quarantine now of a few hundred people than an outbreak later. There have been no domestic transmissions in the United States. That's the good news. There have been a lot of domestic transmission, meaning infected people infecting other people in China, in Taiwan, in Japan, I believe as well in Thailand. And the markets are not very happy about that. Time for a pre-market report wherein we find the most news about coronavirus. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. The only people happy about coronavirus are people who are buying a house or have waited to refinance their house, as the 10-year Treasury bond in the United States reflects the fact that in a time of international uncertainty in markets, money pours in the United States and drives down the rate of interest on a 10-year Treasury. Right now it's at 1.59%. That's not the rate you'll get on a 15-year or a 30-year Treasury, a home loan. But Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian, AndrewandTodd.com, they're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money. They'll get you the best rate possible, the best terms possible. Call them today, 888-888-1172. Do not let this opportunity go by. 888-888-1172. Overseas, boy, they got hammered again. The Hong Kong index is down another 2.62% overnight. They're a half day ahead of us, of course. And their markets have now closed. They lost 2.62%, 5% over 2 days. Japan's index down 1.72%. England's is down 1%. Maybe that's on Huawei and Mike Pompeo telling them, screw you guys, we're not going to have a deal with you if you go with Huawei. German index down 1.1% on Brexit Day. We should be celebrating today. Instead, Brexit Day is tomorrow. We're worried about this virus. The United States had a mixed market yesterday. The Dow was up 11. The NASDAQ was up 5. The S&P was down 2. This morning, the S&P futures are down 25, which is 0.75%. The NASDAQ is down 0.75%, 67, and the Dow is down 216, 0.75%, despite the fact that Microsoft and Apple both had great earnings this week. Facebook, not so much. Facebook down $16 in pre-market trading at $207. Amazon reports today, and we'll see what they do after that. But there's hard to factor in earnings when you've got coronavirus looming over your markets. We'll know more a week from today. We'll have a very good handle on this. The president was meeting with the National Security Council again yesterday, releasing pictures attempting to stay ahead. Kurt Schlichter has a new column in townhall.com echoing my warning. This could be your Katrina, Mr. President, if you're not seen to be on top of it at every moment. Thus far, it appears that is happening. Robert O'Brien on this show yesterday assuring us President meeting with Secretary Azar and CDC on a daily basis, sometimes hourly updates. Good. Not enough. Do more. Now let's go to the last gasps of impeachment. My friend Chris Coons, the senator from Delaware, the Democrat, He's got a last gasp appearance on MSNBC. He knows that the Middle Eastern plan that put forward by President Trump is, as Michael Oren said yesterday, the realistic plan, the only one he's seen in 30 years that's realistic. Chris Coons can't admit that in the middle of impeachment. So he goes on with Andrea Mitchell and says this, cut number 1.
Look, Andrea, it's very difficult to imagine a path towards a two-state solution where the representatives of the hoped-for new state aren't even at the table and have immediately denounced the plan. President Trump, as you know, ran as an unconventional candidate, and when he decided to do something no previous president has done, to go meet with Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, I was willing to say, let's see if this works. Ultimately, President Trump's efforts to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula have failed, and his handshake photo op summits with Kim Jong-un haven't produced significant progress. My concern here in the Middle East is the same, that this is more of a photo op and a press announcement than it is a credible, balanced plan that both parties really could embrace. I continue to support a two-state solution, and I think all of us should be supporting robust diplomatic efforts to try and get the Palestinians to the table and real negotiations underway.
You see, I think that's unfortunate because the Palestinians are never coming to the table. They've never come to the table in 30 years. They will have peace imposed on them if they do not come to the table. If they were smart, they would counteroffer, take the $50 billion, turn it into $100 billion, nudge around the edges, get some additional guarantees on port access, that sort of thing, and try and figure out how to get Hamas out of Gaza with the help of the Israelis and the Saudis and the Egyptians and the UAE. But they're being their typical corrupt, recalcitrant selves, and so the world's going to move on without them. It's their last best chance. Jared Kushner appeared on Fox and Friends, said this, cut number 2.
So basically, it's a very technical proposal that gives the Palestinian people the ability to live a better life. It takes the land, which is very complicated because this issue's been ignored for so many years, and Israel's expanded more and more, which made it harder and harder for the Palestinians to have a place that they could have a state. It doubles the territory that they have the ability to have, and it gives them a lot of economic incentives if they're willing to change their governance structures. You need to have freedom of press. You need to have respect for human rights. You need to have credible institutions that can run a state. So this gives them a pathway to really achieve everything that they've always spoken about, and hopefully once they go through it, they'll have the courage to do what they've done. But again, the Palestinian track record is perfect in not being able to make a deal, but this opportunity is available only because of President Trump's leadership.
And Jared Kushner, who has really done an amazing job over 3 years. I don't care what people say. They don't like to give him credit for anything. He put this together. It's 181 pages. It is very detailed. It is very comprehensive. It is demanding of Israel, demanding of the Palestinians. It's a good deal. It's the best deal. They ought to take this deal and negotiate this deal, but they never miss a chance to miss a chance. Meanwhile, Hakeem, let's do a little impeachment porn, all right? Because it's over tomorrow. Saturday, but next week no one will care. It's a done for. They've defined impeachment down. And by the way, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, not James Q. Wilson. I said last hour, that was James Q. Wilson who came up with the phrase defining deviancy down. It was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. They have defined impeachment down. The Wall Street Journal is correct. Hakeem Jeffries, one of the managers, puffing his feathers, but not persuading anyone. Cut number 4.
We have laid out a devastating case that President Trump corruptly abused his power by pressuring a foreign...
Has he? Are you devastated out there? Anybody looking around seeing devastated people? Senators lying in the aisle, arguments destroyed. It hadn't been devastating. It's been kind of humorous, actually. More Hakeem Jeffries, cut number 5.
Well, it's my view that Hunter Biden is not a relevant witness, but I have great respect for Joe Manchin and for all of the senators.
Stop right there. Hakeem Jeffries, House Manager. Hunter Biden is not a relevant witness, and he brings up Joe Manchin. Why does he bring up Joe Manchin? Because cut number 6, Joe Manchin.
If the judge or whoever rules that it's pertinent, absolutely. I want witnesses. I want people to tell me what you know. You're asking me to make the most important decision I've ever made in the political arena that I'm in or as an individual, and I want to hear everything I can. I want to make sure that the decision I make is the right decision.
Has Chuck Schumer gotten you on the phone yet to talk to you about what you just told us? Because,
Chuck and I have...
I mean, that's not the line necessarily.
Oh, I'm sure. You know me. I'm West Virginia. I'm Joe from West Virginia. And Chuck's my friend. These all, I can get along with everybody. All the Republicans, I don't have anybody I don't like. And I try to work with all of them. But by golly, I've got to go home and look West Virginia in the eye and say, hey, this is why I did it. If I don't have an answer, and if I can't explain it, I can't vote for it. And I have no problem at all.
You know what? They're going to get 2 votes to acquit. I think they're going to get Doug Jones and Joe Manchin because it's a nonsense case by a nonsense man, Adam Schiff, the big loser in all this, Adam Schiff. Jerry Nadler was already a loser. We knew he was a loser, but Adam Schiff had a reputation 4 years ago. He doesn't now. It's gone. We'll be right back after the break, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. My letter to you, America, Hugh Hewitt, is coronavirus is a much more important story than impeachment, which will be over blessedly tomorrow or Saturday. Mitch, the Grim Reaper, is going to kill it dead in the Senate tomorrow or Saturday. Finally done, finished, good. Because we ought to be paying attention to coronavirus. This is the end of my second week covering this. Let me run down the New York Times updates this morning. The World Health Organization will meet to decide if the epidemic is a global emergency. It is. 170 people have died. More than 7,711 cases have been confirmed. It is an epidemic. China has now more cases of the virus than it had of SARS, but comparing the two is tricky. It doesn't matter if it's tricky. You don't want it. Russia suggests it will close its border with China and limit visas. Putin's no dummy. Australia plans to quarantine its citizens on a remote island. Why aren't we doing that here? Anger in Taiwan as China refuses its evacuation request. Everybody's mad at China. Mask hoarders may raise the risk of the outbreak in the United States. I don't think so. We can make a lot of masks in a hurry. All right, so that's the update on coronavirus this morning. What about the markets? Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. I've done more pre-market reports this week than I've done in a year. And that's because the markets tell us more about coronavirus than anything else. AndrewandTodd.com pay for me to do these. And so AndrewandTodd.com are the mortgage lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172. If you want to find out how coronavirus is actually good news for you if you're buying a home, you call them up or you go to AndrewandTodd.com, answer a couple of questions. Because money's pouring into the United States, the 10-year interest rate on a 10-year bond in America is down to 1.59%. I say that again, it's down to 1.59%. I think it's going to drop lower today. I am not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, to quote Yoni. But when there's this much worry, the money comes to the United States. That drives down interest rates. You can buy your house. You can become a co-borrowing, non-occupying owner with your son or daughter, grandson, granddaughter. Get them into a house or a townhouse by signing on the dotted line, having them build their credit, get them into a condo, a townhouse, a little house, get them started. At these rates, best economic move you can make for their entire life. Right now, gold is up to $15.79 an ounce, and all of the futures are red. In the United States, the S&P is down 25, the NASDAQ is down 67, the Dow is down 216. Overseas, Japan dropped 1.72%, Hong Kong 2.62%, England 1%, Germany 1%. So you would guess maybe we'll drop 1% today, but I'm beginning to think we've only got 5 cases and we haven't gone off of 5 in 3 days. No domestic transmission in the United States. Maybe we've got this thing. I don't want to say quarantine. Maybe we've got our arms around it, and it's going to be destroying Chinese economic. And so pick winners and losers. I own Amazon. I'm very bullish on Amazon because I don't think people want to go out to the mall for a while. But that's where we are as of this morning. The people who are winning are like Corovo Inc., which is up 8%, and Lom Research Corporation, which is up 6%, and ServiceNow, which is up 6%. These are companies that may do very, very well indeed. What you don't want to have happen is Facebook. Facebook reported bad earnings yesterday. They're down 7% in the pre-market trading. Microsoft, up 3%. You know who's getting hammered? Carnival Cruise Line. Whew. We're going on a little baby cruise in April and May. We'll be fine. It's in France. I think wine keeps it away. That's a joke, friends. But Carnival Cruise Line down 8.6%. What are they worried about? They're worried about a global pandemic. Not going to be the greatest thing in the world for traveling, is it? Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back to you. Don't go anywhere. It's Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio on the West Coast today, joined now by the Washington Free Beacon editor-in-chief, Eliana Johnson. Good morning, Eliana. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh.
It appears as though Godzilla Mitch McConnell has met Mothra John Bolton, and Godzilla has beaten Mothra. What do you think?
You know, it appears that way. And right now, though, let's wait till the vote happens. I think McConnell's been pretty good at playing the expectations game, because at times it has seemed really uncertain. And I think McConnell's also done a good job in the sense that I think when the vote happens, it will seem like a real victory for him.
And I agree. When will that vote on witnesses happen? And if, in fact, none are called, when will the vote on acquittal happen?
You know, I think it's looking like the vote on witnesses will happen in the next couple of days. And then the vote on acquittal shortly after that.
I don't think it can happen today. I don't know how much time they used yesterday of the 16 hours allocated to questions, but I believe they'll have to use the rest of today to allocate questions to both sides. And then tomorrow will be showdown at the OK Corral, and all the senators want to go home, and they don't want to be talking about this, and they can't talk about anything except this. So I'm looking for the wrap-up to be tomorrow, Eliana. Are you with me on that one?
I think that's right. A Friday wrap-up.
I also have given out my MVP for the Best Lawyer Award of this Super Bowl of impeachment to Pat Philbin, Deputy Counsel in the White House. How about you? Who do you give your MVP trophy to?
You know, I thought Mike Purpura was compelling when I was most able to tune in, I have to say, last weekend. During the days, I'm not as able to be watching this stuff closely.
I don't think many people are. The ratings do not show that this was a boom for anybody except the Trump addicted on both the right and the left. Let me turn to coronavirus. I covered that extensively at the top of both hours.
With it, Hugh.
Yeah. What do you think the average American thinks about coronavirus right now?
You know, shortly after you tuned me into it, the first impact it had on me was really I noticed it on the markets, and I think I imagine that's similar for others. It's had a real impact on the markets, and I see Senator Tom Cotton, a frequent guest of yours, calling for a limited travel ban to China, but it's scary. It's very scary.
We have not yet had domestic-to-domestic transmission, meaning no one who has brought the virus to the United States has given it to another person in the United States yet, but it will require 14 days from since it actually takes 14 days of unknown transmission to relax a little bit only after you've stopped entry. So Tom Cotton's arguing we can't even begin to know for 14 days. I think he's right. I do know the president is meeting every day. Do you think the president is going to avoid having this become his Katrina because he is leaning forward on it, Eliana Johnson?
Let's hope so. I mean, it's a real challenge, I think, and I really tell you, I don't know.
All right. Let me turn to your new article, which I just tweeted out. New Koch group, like the Koch brothers. New Koch group dogged by charges of anti-Semitism. Subheader: Quincy Institute staff and scholars bring a long record of attacks on American Jews, Israel to the organization. I'm kind of shocked by this. I thought the Koch brothers were friends of Israel. I thought most of their organizations were. Explain to us what you've discovered.
Well, the Quincy Institute is a new think tank funded by Charles Koch and George Soros in part, and several of the fellows there bring a long record of antagonism, I think, to American Jews and to Israel. Chief among them, I should say first, the Quincy Institute is devoted to developing a new foreign policy of restraint and semi-isolationism. But I think those views are often found intertwined with antagonism to Jews and Israel, going back to the America First Committee of the 1930s. And several of the fellows there have made comments, widely considered anti-Semitic. There was Larry Wilkerson, the former chief of staff to Colin Powell, who has accused, who has spread the conspiracy theory that Syrian use of chemical weapons might have been an Israeli false flag operation, and said that the Jewish lobby in America was the chief reason for going to war in Iraq in 2003, and many others there who have made similar comments. And the salient thing to me, Hugh, is ask for comment on this. The head of the Charles Koch Institute and the president of the Quincy Institute have simply refused to respond as to whether they consider these comments bigoted, anti-Semitic, or whether the Quincy Institute stands by these comments, all delineated in the piece.
Very much so. In fact, I want to quote from the piece. Paul Pillar, a veteran CIA officer and now a Quincy Institute expert on intelligence and terrorism, has argued that the Republican mega donor Sheldon Adelson's first loyalty is to Israel, writing in 2014, quoting now Pillar, "The Republican Party isn't even his first love among political parties. That would be the Likud Party." He continued, "Nor is the United States Adelson's first love among countries. This is among the oldest of the worst anti-Semitic tropes. I can't believe the Quincy Institute hired him."
It is shocking, and the most shocking thing to me is, asked directly, does the Quincy Institute stand by these comments? Do they represent the views of the Quincy Institute? There's just no response.
Now I'm interested in Sarah Leah Whitson, who your article identifies as the managing director of the Quincy Institute and a longtime fundraiser for the Armenian National Committee. Is there any historic animosity between groups of Americans who are concerned with Israeli security and groups of Americans who are concerned for justice for Armenia? I mean, is there any kind of a history here that I'm unaware of?
I don't believe so. I'm not sure that she's a longtime fundraiser. She did serve as master of ceremonies for the group at one point. But one of the things that really jumped out at me in looking at this is that there's fierce opposition among many Quincy Institute fellows to, what they call the Israel lobby, or the, the pro-Israel community. But many of them are either members of other foreign policy lobbies, like Trita Parsi, the founder and former president of NIAC, which has a lobbying arm, and Sarah Leah Whitson, who you mentioned, emceed an event for the Armenian lobby in the country. And so it does seem, I think, that there's a singling out of American Jews and of Israel when it comes to foreign policy lobbies in the U.S.
Now, I want to read the last paragraph of the piece. The Koch-funded group, the Quincy Institute, will be holding an event in Washington next month featuring Whitson, the executive director, and Matt Duss, the national security advisor to Bernie Sanders, who, as a blogger alongside Clifton at Think Progress, defended Freeman during his short live battle to join the Obama administration. Freeman, he argued, was forced to withdraw because he voiced, quote, some inconvenient truths about the Israeli-Palestine conflict and represented a challenge to the treasured neoconservative myth that the U.S. and Israel interests are identical, Duss said. Again, more classic tropes. I am really surprised. I know Charles Koch. He's been a guest on this.
I would point out that the reference there is to Chaz Freeman, who was President Obama's nominee to lead the National Intelligence Council, and the controversy about him was actually his defense of the Chinese response to Tiananmen Square, as well as his leadership of a group that was funded in part by the Saudi government, not voicing inconvenient truths about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
All right, good clarification. Do you believe, are you catching flack for this article, Eliana?
From the predictable corners, I think.
Okay, predictable corners. Now to the Middle East peace plan. I had Robert O'Brien on the show yesterday. I had to explain he's a good friend, all my disclosures, etc. I do believe this Middle East peace plan is a last best hope for the Palestinians. I would make a counteroffer. They're crazy to let this moment go by without saying, you said 50, we want 150 billion. You said these properties, we want these properties. but no one seems to think they're going to do it. Do you see any whisper of a hope that the Palestinians are coming to their senses on actually negotiating?
No, but I have to say, from back when I was covering the White House at Politico, I don't think that there was ever I don't think that was ever the thought in putting this plan together. I think the goal of the plan was sort of to reset the lines and reset expectations. And it really was intended to be symbolic rather than practical.
I think it's actually a map of what's going to unfold with an imposed peace and annexations, and that the Arab governments will tacitly or explicitly agree, and that the Palestinian Authority will grow into the state that's outlined, but they will do so without the advantage of having gotten an extra measure of money and land by refusing to participate. Last comment to you, Eliana.
I think, the prospects for any real cooperation and agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians are zero right now. And the intentions of the Trump administration were really not to bring the two sides to the table, but to offer something that was completely symbolic and intended actually to reset expectations in terms of future administrations.
And I think they've done that. And so I think I count it as a win for Trump. We shall see. Eliana Y. Johnson, executive editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, follower on Twitter at Eliana Y. Johnson. Follow me to the next segment. Time for me to tell you about Honor Bound Coffee, honorboundcoffee.com, started by the same people who started ReliefFactor.com, which I'll tell you about in a second. 100% of the profits from Honor Bound Coffee will go to serve military families. And I've already got them set up with the Semper Fi Fund. Pete and Seth Talbot are in touch with them. That's going to be one of the groups. I've got a couple other groups to recommend to them. I vet these groups very, very highly. I know Pete and Seth, and I trust them. If you subscribe, you will be sipping your coffee and supporting military families. And Honor Bound Coffee is terrific. You pick the kind of coffee you want. They got 4 great brews. They got 4 different sorts of grinds. You get 2 for 1 starting offer, but you got to get started. Sign up for the subscription at honorboundcoffee.com. If you're a daily coffee drinker like I am, you need it to keep coming anyway. Save yourself a trip to the store. honorboundcoffee.com. Give it a try. Support military families. Now, support yourself as well with ReliefFactor.com. I took in the first hour, remind you about it, hour number 2 and hour number 3. I get complaints that I never tell people about the commutes in the middle of the country. Well, that's because I don't really think there are large commutes in the middle of the country. Chicago, I'm not on in Chicago Live, so you're not my problem. You're other people's problem. But I talk about the commutes on the West Coast, which it's 4:45 in the morning on the West Coast, and people are getting into their car. Why? Because they've got to drive to Silicon Valley. They've got to drive forever. And you know what an hour and a half drive does? A lot of you don't have to do that. You know what an hour and a half does each day? It ain't good. It's not good for your back. It's not good for your ankle. It's not good for your neck. ReliefFactor.com helps. Take it every single day. Don't stop taking what your doctor prescribes. Please don't do that. But it's a natural supplement, and you ought to be taking that natural supplement. Senator Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri and expert on biological threats, joins me next on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Last week I was in the Senate Dirksen office building, and an old friend, Jim Talent, came up to me and told me something I did not know, that he and former Senator Baumgaertner had done a lot of work on bioterrorism, pandemic preparation, told me about the Center for Disease Control and the National Pandemic Center at Johns Hopkins, and left me a little bit worried. Senator Talent, good morning. You gonna ruin my morning again?
It's too early to either ruin your morning or brighten your morning. I think we'll know a lot more if we do our regular interview a week from now.
All right, explain your background first on pandemics, because I want people to understand you're not just making this up as you go along.
Yeah, well, in between 2007 and 12, at the request of the then Senate leadership, former Senator Bob Graham and I co-chaired two congressional commissions on the danger of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction to terrorists. And we focused very quickly on bioterror because the advances in life science have brought the ability to create a bioweapon, a biological agent, within the reach of subnational movements. Okay, and we were very concerned that it might be the weapon of choice. Now then, in doing that, we then turned to the issue of how resilient the country would be in the event of a pandemic, a global pandemic, whether man-made or naturally occurring. And we started a private not-for-profit, and we did a stem-to-stern evaluation of that, which we issued in the fall of 2011. And I really am pretty proud of that, although I want to say that, we assembled a group of health leaders who did, obviously, they had the expertise to do the work. But that's when I got clued in on these issues. So I would say, for a politician, I know a lot about these issues. How's that?
That is good. And so with that background, I want you to comment on Senator Tom Cotton's tweet of yesterday. He wrote, China, but also Germany, Japan, Vietnam, Taiwan, all countries with person-to-person transmission of coronavirus. Meanwhile, flights from China are landing in the U.S. every hour. This has to stop. What do you think, Jim Talent?
I think there's a very good chance that this doesn't happen like today. It'll be soon. I think Tom is in the ballpark. I do have a lot of faith in our public health officials at the CDC, and I think they'll take the right step when we need to take it. Can I give you 4 new things about this, or
yes.
4 just real quickly? Okay. The first thing is the key thing at this point, a lot of questions, okay? The key thing is what's called the R0, which is the average rate of infection from one person to another. How many people is an infected person on average likely to infect? So if that number is 1 or below, they don't really worry about a pandemic. If it's above 2, and the further it is above 2, it's concerning. It's very concerning, and we don't know yet. Because to figure it out, they have to do what they call gumshoe epidemiology. They have to go back and talk to people who are infected, find out how they got it, and construct conclusions over time, okay? Different countries are coming to different conclusions. I have not heard one that is below 2, okay? Now, again, we don't know, and we'll know more on that issue, which is the key issue, I think, in about a week.
R0.
2.
Okay.
Yeah, R0. I think it's NAUGHT.
R0. Okay.
2, everybody says, this is good news, the Chinese are being much more transparent this time. So I tell people, this is not the time to beat up on the Chinese, okay? We need to work with the Chinese. I get it, but they're being much more helpful this time around, and you understand why. 3, a piece of good news. The bad news is it's highly unlikely we're going to be able to get a vaccine in a relevant time frame. As Randy Larson told you, you can't just spend a bunch of money and flip a switch and get a vaccine. The good news is, what I'm hearing is there are promising antivirals that will be therapeutic, and that's really important. And so the issue there is, how good are the ones we have? Can we make other ones, and can we manufacture them quickly and get them distributed? And what is the FDA going to do in terms of approval processes? These are things that are being talked about now. The good news from a diagnostic front is that you can diagnose this in about an hour. The bad news at this point is you have to have a sample of the disease in order to do it, and only the CDC at this point has it. So what I'm told is that suspect cases have to be sent to the CDC now. But the CDC is acting very quickly to get samples out to all the states. What we really need is point of care diagnosis, so local hospitals can do it, so we can get it really.
What are we
really
doing,
quickly.
Jim Talent, less than a minute, about people landing from China? Are we asking them to self-report? Are we following them? Are we tracking
Well, the
them?
only thing I've heard is that one group that we've moved to an Army base, and this is the sort of thing we're going to have to consider, because what if you are going to quarantine people who are coming in, where do you put them? I mean, what do you do? And if the numbers, what Stav was saying is correct, we want to see, the numbers have gone vertical in China. The way these things work is you get 2 cases, 3 cases, 4 cases, 5 cases, and then when it's bad, it goes to 50, 100, 500, what you're seeing in China now.
So next week will be the tell. In the meantime,
that's what my people say, that they'll know a lot better in a week or so.
Next week will be the tell. In the meantime, I think markets are reflecting a little bit of steadying this morning in the pre-market. We'll check up on that next hour. Jim Talent, following you on Twitter at Jim Talent. Thanks for your expertise. Much appreciated. Don't go anywhere, America. Chuck Todd is next. And some experts from the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt on the West Coast. Good to have you with me this morning, joined by Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Chuck, before we get to grim stuff, I just want your prediction on the Super Bowl. Are you going with the 49ers, or do you think the Chiefs are going to rule?
Well, here's, you know me, you got to do a lot of you got to do your scouting. And the Super Bowl's in Miami, and the 49ers have already been partying on South Beach.
Oh.
Jimmy G, South Beach, give me the Chiefs, Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes. I have a feeling that Jimmy G in South Beach is a bad idea. All I would tell your listeners to do, go Google Jimmy G's love life, and then ask yourself how he's going to handle South Beach this week. I'm telling you, I think that's worth an extra touchdown.
There you go. We've just had it, and if anybody knows South Beach, Chuck, the native of Miami, knows South Beach.
Well, when bottle service, that's my middle name. I'm kidding.
All right, grim stuff. Hewitt's rule. If you get behind on a disaster, you can never catch up. It's the Katrina rule. I think Trump is close to being behind on coronavirus. What do you think?
Well, it's a risk. I think that I look at this and it's a reminder that China's got a long way to go. I mean, I think, this is scary. It's a reminder that there's a lot of China that's still third world. We think of them as this economic power, this technological rival, and in some cases they are. But look at how far behind that society is on the basics when it comes to dealing with a healthcare crisis like this. They are showing their struggles to managing a large population, which is obviously of great concern to the rest of the world, since they could, something like this could create a pandemic in quickly. I do think the president's sort of light touch with Xi, he always has such a personal light touch with him, is risky. It's always risky for him politically.
Now, we've had a few hundred Americans land at March Air Force Base, which is a couple hours east of L.A. We don't know what to do with them because the incubation period is maybe 14 days. You may be contagious for 5.5 days, according to a new...
They still haven't decided. We don't know if you're contagious before you get the symptoms, before you see symptoms. Right? Yeah. We don't know that yet.
Well, the Chinese say you are. They say you're contagious for 5.5 days. We don't know. Well, that's not a WHO. That's a Chinese scientist story. Correct. So I don't know what level of DEFCON the United States ought to go to, but I actually go back to Hewitt's rule. If you get behind on a disaster, you never catch up, Chuck. Have you ever seen anyone effectively cut up?
No, I mean, look at President Obama. I would argue that the two biggest disasters he had to deal with, right, that were sort of out of his control, was the oil spill. Yep. The coming out of the Gulf, and Ebola.
Yep.
Right. And when you look at both situations, in hindsight, the disasters were mitigated pretty well. But in the moment, what did it look like? That they were always playing catch up. That's the thing that in fact, both of those should be very instructive to Trump. In totality, in hindsight, they did a pretty good job. In the moment, it always looked like they were behind. And that's what you got to be careful of.
Yeah, Kurt Schlichter wrote in Town Hall today that Katrina was flooded with supplies, flooded with everything, but flooded too late, behind. You flew over, you didn't land, right. President Bush. You never catch up. So if I'm Trump, I stop. Tom Cotton said, stop landing airplanes from China.
Right. Well, not only that, it would also serve his own politics well to show that he's not worried about Bolton and impeachment first. He's worried about the American people first. That's the other message you send by getting your focus on this. I mean, that's another risk here he has.
Now, I want to talk with you rather crudely about winners and losers of pandemics. And it is crude, but I do think we have to look ahead. If this is a real pandemic, if it goes vertical as it has in China, indoor things and people win. Amazon, UPS, Netflix, Big Pharma, TV and radio win. Google and App, who do their advertising online at home, win. Outdoor things lose. Malls, sporting events, retail, politics. And that's the last point. If this becomes a problem, who loses in the Democratic primary, Chuck?
Oh, I keep coming back to, I think this is exposing the weakness of China as a world power. I mean, I'm not ready to assess our domestic because I look at this. We have this great rivalry with China. We've got our number one ally in Europe deciding to not take our advice when it comes to 5G.
Good point.
And work with Chinese technology. And look, if I'm the American government trying to make this point, be careful of Chinese technology, I also say, look, this is a country that's still, they can't do the basics. I mean, in a good day, there's lines for healthcare. I mean, there's never been a good healthcare system in that country when there isn't an epidemic like this. So, I keep coming back to that. This to me is a reminder why China's not ready to be a leader. They got to get their own act together a little bit. And this would be, you want to talk about winners and losers. I think this is a reminder, be careful getting into bed with China.
Well, I like to focus on the times that I am very critical of the Trump administration because people think I'm not critical enough. This is one of them. We are not giving out information about patients A through B through C.
We don't know what we should worry about. Right. I don't feel, you're absolutely right. I know this. I don't feel well informed.
Exactly.
Collectively about what do I need to be on the lookout for? What is the symptom? I mean, look, the piece of good news that I read this morning is that this doesn't appear to be as severe medically to people as SARS was. That's a good sign, but we don't know if the scary thing about them, we all know about viruses, is that they can mutate.
Yeah, the smartest people I've talked to are from Johns Hopkins. I've got another one coming on, but Jim Talent was just on. He and Bob Graham ran the biohazard panel for 6 years. He told me the R naught on this, they don't know yet. If it's above 2, it's a serious vertical problem. Some estimates say it's at 3. We don't know, and we won't know for 14 days. But Chuck Todd, raw politics. Just you study this; it's in your veins.
I hear you. I know, but I am not. I just think that this is. I think we're not there on the political. I mean, it is. You are right that the second this feels as if the second an American gets this who didn't go to China, all hell breaks loose.
Exactly. Bingo. That's the moment.
That's the point. That's the moment. Right now, everybody's connected to the city where this started.
That's the moment.
The second an American gets it who never has been to China, watch out.
Bingo. All right, now let's switch quickly to impeachment in the Iowa caucuses. I believe impeachment is over by Saturday. Agree or disagree?
I do too. I think it's possible, even as late as Friday night.
And what do you see happening in Iowa?
Look, I think if you were to do this, the safest bet, if you wanted to bet your trifecta, if you wanted to do my exacta box would be Bernie Biden. My trifecta would be Bernie Biden Warren. I think right now, and that's just based on tracking polls that I know. Here's where we are trajectory-wise. Bernie it feels as if he's a lock for first or second. There is no scenario that has him below second. Biden could be anywhere from first to fourth. I think Warren could be anywhere from second to fourth. Pete is the one that everybody seems to show in their own polling, in their own way that they track, is losing altitude. I asked this question about 2 months ago. Is Pete Dean or Obama? This week, he looks more like Dean.
Why is that?
That is a huge...
What happened?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the fact of the matter is Iowa caucus goers are just as aware of the electability issue. They're very aware of the fact that he gets 0% when it comes to African-American support. And at the end of the day, these caucus goers do care about who can win, who can bring the party together.
All right, last question, Chuck. I don't want to miss this
argument.
I don't want to miss this. You are probably the most avid sports fan I know and the most informed. How did the death of Kobe and the family, and you've got kids and I've got kids, how did it impact you?
What impacted me the hardest is that Kobe Bryant was doing what I do every weekend. Going to your kid's game, going to your kid's practice. And who are my closest adult friends? The parents of the kids who play with my kids in sports. They are my closest. So I that's all I kept thinking about. And I have a feeling, I know that Kobe Bryant and his wife were probably, because it's funny how the bond you have with the parents of the kids of your teams, it's an extended family. That's how, and it's all my wife and I kept thinking about. I have to tell you, every single day this week, I have not been with my family all week. I've been up here. So the second I got on a plane, I sent them all texts to make sure the last thing they heard from me. That's what it's impacted me. That's how it's done.
That's eloquent. Chuck Todd, thank you. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press, and you watch him for a reason. He's the best. Stay tuned, America. I'll be right back. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. This is Eskimo Pie Eyes song to Dwayne. He gets mad and he storms out. Then EPE says to him.
EPO?
EPE. Eskimo Pie Eyes.
I see.
You try to be smart. You take it to heart. You blow over the studio. You're so easily deflated, radio blogger. You don't realize. It's all compromise. EPE wins. That's the compromise. This is like Dwayne's anthem. Turn up the radio, America. Turn up as loud as you can. This is Dwayne's anthem. Petula Clark all day drives me crazy. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt, giving you a little happy music. Chuck Todd made me sad. I thought about the truth of what he had to say. It is, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt is just so devastated by the Kobe crash. And it's because we are one degree removed from a lot of the people. My son is closer to some of the people. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt keeps saying 8 children without parents. One or both parents. It's just a horrible thing. And Chuck is right. Our closest friends are church friends and friends of our kids. And sports were a lot of water polo parents. We're all crazy. And we're all friends. And so Chuck was just correct. That was very touching. Let me check the stock market, where it's interesting to watch. The market is just divided over what? And this is brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd of Aiken. They lend you money with Sarah Pacific Mortgage. Call them at 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. The 10-year Treasury's down at 1.59%. You're going to get the best rate you're ever going to get on a 15 or a 30-year mortgage. Help your kid get into a townhouse, a house, or a condo. Do it right now. Call Andrew and Todd at AndrewandTodd.com. Answer a couple questions. They'll get right back to your call. Them at 888-888-1172. Here's what's going on in the market. There's a tug of war between people who think, China is screwed, and we're good. And they don't know what to do with their money. And they know that, and by the way, I own Amazon, so discount this. They know that Amazon wins if everybody stays home. So, and I gave you my list of winners and losers. I put it away somewhere. Oh, there it is. Winners. Indoor things and people. Amazon, UPS, Netflix. Big Pharma is a winner. Google, Apple that add their homebody people. Outdoor things lose. Crowds, malls, sporting events, retail politics. China is losing. Overnight, their market just got hammered. Down another 2.62% in the Hong Kong Hang Seng Index. That's 5% in 2 days. Japan down 1.72%. England down 1.5%. Our early trading, not that bad. S&P is down 0.82%. NASDAQ down 0.66%. Dow down 0.76% because we do not have domestic transmission here. Tom Cotton is saying, shut down all flights from China. Good point. I think they ought to do it. Once you get behind, Hewitt's rule. If you get behind on a disaster, you never catch up. If you get behind on a disaster, you never catch up. Some disasters matter more than others. This disaster could matter a lot, like Ebola. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully they come up with a vaccine, some new antivirals, all that good stuff. I'm going to talk after the break with Dr. Amesh Adalja, infectious disease doctor at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, to get the latest on medical treatments for coronavirus. Did you also notice how matter of fact, Generalissimo, you notice how matter of fact Chuck was on the impeachment?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Done.
It's done. Everybody knows that Mitch McConnell has the votes.
It's done. It's done.
He's not going to announce it ahead of time. There's no reason for him to do so. But they know he has the votes. Can I have
Hewitt law number 2?
Yes.
Don't play cards with Mitch McConnell.
This is why you want Mitch on that wall. You need Mitch on that wall.
You need that Mitch on the wall. Hewitt rule number 1, if you get behind on a disaster, you never catch up. Hewitt rule number 2, do not play cards with Mitch McConnell. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Thank you so much for listening to the program this morning. Joined by Dr. Amesh Adalja. He is an infectious disease doctor at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Dr. Adalja, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What is the most important thing for my audience to know about the Wuhan coronavirus?
The most important thing to know is that there are a lot of unanswered questions, and the experience in China is probably a harrowing thing for the people that are living there, but it's unclear where we can put this new virus in terms of risk stratification, because we don't quite understand the severity. We don't quite understand how many mild cases there are to severe cases. And we have to remember that coronaviruses do cause mild illness in a lot of people. And some of the panic that's going on in the United States, for example, is really unwarranted because the cases we have here are well contained. And there's actually been no severe cases or deaths really outside of China, or no sustained transmission outside of China. So there's a very different disparity there's a big disparity between what's going on in China and what's going on in the rest of the world.
Senator Talent, who was on last hour and served on the Commission on Biohazards and Pandemic Threats for many years with Senator Baumgaertner, Democrat of Florida, said the R0 factor on coronavirus, the Wuhan coronavirus, is not known at this point, that it's above. If it is above 2, he will be concerned. Do you have a guesstimate on that yet, Doctor?
I don't have a really strong guesstimate on it, because when you're in the early days of an outbreak and you don't have full information, you can really get fooled by the data and come up with R0 or reproductive numbers for the virus, how many other people it infects that are way off from the actual. We clearly know that in parts of China it's above 1 because there's chains of transmission that are going on. And for some people, it would be, the R0 would be 0 because the patients in the United States, we've had no transmission, so their R0 is 0. So when you come up with a big number, 1 R0 for the whole world, it's really dangerous to do that, because it's not necessarily that there's just this magical number that governs everyone's transmission. So I do think it's somewhere probably in the range between the 1 and 2 range, but it's hard to know exactly where it fits, because there has not been a strong effort to find the mild cases in China. And the mild cases may be what's driving the transmission. So you can kind of get it's kind of a technical thing, but you can kind of get a wide range of R0, none of which are really true.
At the Hopkins, I'm sure some of your people are advising the president and the Secretary Azar. But if your phone rings and it's Donald Trump and he asks you, Doc, Tom Cotton wants me to stop every plane from China from landing. Should I? How do you answer him?
I would say no, we don't need to stop planes from landing. There probably is very little traffic going on now between China and the United States based on just the fact that there's less demand for that, and there are travel restrictions out of China. But we don't want to further compound the problems of this outbreak because of travel restrictions. When you have travel restrictions during an outbreak, even though it might make a lot of sense to the general public that that's what you do, it ends up making things worse because people try to escape the travel restrictions. You actually end up making the situation on the ground at the center of the outbreak worse, because you not only don't people leave, you actually can't get resources in, you create shortages, you actually increase the force of transmission in that area. And it's really unnecessary. We have robust screening procedures that are being implemented now in 20 airports. We've done well with the first 5 cases. We have a really extensive CDC system for tracking people that may have been exposed to the virus. So no, I would not ban any kind of travel at this point. I do think we need to be vigilant about people who might have been exposed, but we don't want to make things worse in China and then allow this outbreak to kind of spiral out of control there and then put the world at greater risk by using travel bans, which never work.
Dr. Adalja, I'm a bit skeptical about the reporting and monitoring of patients A, B, C, D, E, and F in the United States for the simple reason that there has been no public disclosure of which flights they entered in the United States on, nor whether or not they went into any public place. And I know in Germany they've had domestic transmission person to person from people who have not been to China. Do you criticize the CDC for sitting on this information, or do you think it's appropriate?
I don't criticize them for sitting on this information. I think what you have to remember is that what we know about coronavirus is that you're symptomatic. When you're symptomatic is when you're the most contagious. So if you are not contagious, if you're not symptomatic when you're on an airplane, it's not necessarily putting other people at risk. I know people get panicked, they get worried, but you really have to look at the science behind the virus and when it transmits. And we know that the force of transmission is when people are symptomatic, when they're coughing and sneezing. And the CDC has been scrutinizing patients' symptoms, knowing when they're symptomatic, when they're not, and that helps to delimit who's at risk. And this is different than what happened, for example, with the Canadian patients in Toronto who both were symptomatic on a plane, where they have disclosed, where the Canadian public health authorities have disclosed that information about the plane and have looked at the passengers. When you don't have a symptomatic person, you don't really place other people at major risk of contracting this. Remember, this isn't an airborne virus the way measles is or something like that as well. So you have to really be coughed on, sneezed on, have some type of respiratory secretion landing on you from the other patient. So it's really important to keep that in mind, and that may be part of the reason why we're not talking about which flights they came in on, just that they were which airports they were found at, that they went through, or what their city location is. And I'm pretty confident that's the best way to go about this right now, because we really want to not have people overreact and have a panic that's not warranted, and then take drastic actions. We already have people causing shortages of surgical masks, which they don't really need to have in the United States.
I agree with that, but Dr. Adalja, as someone who traveled through LAX, I would like to know if people had arrived, patient A or B, through LAX at the same time I was, even though they are asymptomatic, because I have read in the South China Morning Post that Chinese doctors believe asymptomatic patients can be contagious for up to 5 days. I don't know if you've confirmed that in the United States yet, but if that's true, wouldn't it at least argue for over-disclosure, not of names or hospitals where they're being treated, but of travel path?
If there was asymptomatic transmission, then I do think you have a little bit of a different dynamic going on, and we do disclose all of that for measles, where you have, or for certain diseases where you may have very casual contact with people. But still, even if I think it just that complicates it, and I don't think that we have confirmed it. It's one report. We've never seen it before with any of the other 6 coronaviruses. We haven't seen any evidence to support it. There's one report, and it's really important to scrutinize whether someone might have had mild symptoms that they didn't notice.
Question for you, Doctor, for the public. What is the best book that is accessible to the public that they ought to read on epidemics and control prevention?
There was a book that came out in 1994 called The Coming Plague by Laurie Garrett. I think that's probably the most comprehensive book that takes you through a lot of different outbreaks and epidemics that's accessible. It's pretty thick. So there's another one I'll recommend called The Deadliest Enemy by Mike Osterholm, who was the state epidemiologist in Minnesota. That one takes you through his life as a state epidemiologist and really gives you a lot of insight into many different outbreaks that happened in the last 25 years, which he was a part of. But a comprehensive one from A to Z is probably The Coming Plague, but The Deadliest Enemy is a great book that I would recommend as well.
I've been listening to The Great Influenza and find it very, very educational as to how public health develops, sort of like the ghost map. But I will go with your 2 recommendations, The Coming Plague and what was the second one? The Deadliest Enemy.
The Deadliest Enemy by Osterholm.
Now, Doctor, let's turn to the positive side. Assuming that we've got a new coronavirus here, how long does it take to get a diagnostic test? How long does it take to and get it distributed? And how long does it take to develop a viral remedy and then a vaccine?
So the diagnostic test currently available is being done at the CDC. The CDC is rapidly trying to get that out to state health department laboratories so that it's more distributed. To get a commercial diagnostic test, it may take quite some time because of the ability to actually develop one that can be done in non-sophisticated labs, and get the technology right and get it through FDA regulations. So I think that we won't see a rapid test that's available like in a doctor's office or in an emergency department for some time, maybe months. But we will be having regular testing done at state health departments and maybe some local health departments as well. When it comes to a vaccine, you have to remember that vaccine development is measured in years, not in months, and you don't really get a vaccine before the credits roll in a movie like you saw in Contagion. We are really moving very rapidly. There are new technologies that have accelerated that process, and the best estimates are that probably in a few months we might see phase 1 trials, but that's not the same thing as having a commercially available vaccine. So I don't think that we should count on a vaccine being available for this virus on a very wide scale for at least a year or maybe more, because this is something that is not done overnight. Regarding antivirals, that's a different story. We do have a couple of antivirals that are promising. So these are medications that may be able to stop the virus from making copies of itself in your body and maybe decrease the symptoms. And there's one promising avenue of research is some HIV medications that people looked at way back in SARS in 2003, and those are being now used compassion and compassionate use for patients that are sick, and as well as for developing a clinical trial to use these HIV medications that might be able to be repurposed against this virus. And then there's another experimental drug that is also being considered for clinical trials. So that we may see start pretty quickly, so long as we have patients in places like China where there are enough to actually do clinical trials to determine whether they work or not.
Last question, doctor, and this is a journalist question, curiosity about someone like you with the expertise you have. How are you spending your day? Are you doing it on media? Are you doing research? Are you reading public sources? How are you getting your information, and what are you doing with it?
All of the above. So I do spend a lot of time reading the news reports just to keep track of the case counts and what's going on the ground in China. I'm reading all the medical journal reports that have come out with the actual detailed clinical data on these initial patients. That's kind of hard to come by, but we are starting to see it trickle out in some of our medical journals now. I'm spending time on conference calls regarding what's going on with preparations in the United States and listening to WHO press conferences about what their actions are going on. And I'm using that to talk to the media to try and explain things to the general public and to policymakers about what the best actions are to take, and trying to come up with my own predictions for what I think will happen with this virus and what I think the best actions might be. I'm writing as well. I've written some op-eds on this topic and just trying to get the information out, because I think the more information you give the public, the better we will handle this outbreak.
I agree. Last question. Anything that is not being done that Dr. Adalja would want done right now?
I really think that the key question we have to understand is the severity. We need to know how common severe cases are, how common fatal cases are, because we really don't know the denominator, how many people are infected in China, because we know that coronaviruses are very common. We have 4 coronaviruses that circulate regularly every season, and they cause about a quarter of the common colds, and sometimes they can cause severe disease. We want to really understand what the case fatality rate is, and the only way we're going to know that is by understanding how many mild cases there are, because all of our response efforts are premised on the fact that this is based on its severity. So we really have to get very granular data on how severe it is so we can actually risk stratify it.
I must say, Dr. Adalja, you're a heck of a guest. Thank you for spending time with me. Good luck with your work. Good luck with continuing to be a calm, reasoned, and available voice on the air. And I look forward to talking to you next week. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Isn't he great? That was terrific. We'll post that at the YouTube channel for Hugh Hewitt. We'll post that at the website, hughhewitt.com. But our YouTube channel is where you want to go and get that. And the one that's coming up with Emily Baumgaertner, as well as Jim Talent and Dr. Michael Oren. Don't miss any of those. All at my YouTube channel. Subscribe to it, America. Subscribe to it. And subscribe to ReliefFactor.com. I've already told you about this. We go from the worst case of medicine to preventative medicine right now. Relief Factor supports the temporary relief of minor aches and pain by combining 4 natural supplements that medicine has known about for millennia. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. And none of you are, even the Steelers fans know you should be taking omega every day, but take it in the right amount. Take it in the best designed, safest, easiest to eat, easiest to swallow pill pack out there. That's ReliefFactor.com. Put together by Pete and Seth Talbot. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. Join the tens of thousands of people who take it every single day. ReliefFactor.com. Coming back with Emily Baumgaertner, medical reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Don't go anywhere, America. Stay right here on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm joined by Emily Baumgaertner of the Los Angeles Times. She is the medical reporter. Where do I find you this morning, Emily?
Good morning. I'm out here in Culver City, California.
Well, good morning to you. Thanks for getting up early. I just had a great conversation with Dr. Adalja of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. A lot of calm there. What are you seeing in your reporting about whether or not Americans are unduly or unnecessarily concerned about coronavirus, or are they too indifferent to it?
It's a great question. I think we're seeing lots of reports across the country of masks selling out, people being very concerned. From the looks of it right now, there's really no reason to be doing anything other than washing your hands. That's not to say that this will not become a greater concern in the United States, but right now, with 5 cases and a very strong public health system, it's not something that every American should be worried about nearly as much as they're worried about catching the seasonal flu.
Are people canceling their travel plans to China in your reporting?
As far as I can tell, that's being done both voluntarily and involuntarily. I'm sure you've heard about some of the commercial flights being canceled. And according to travel advisories coming out of the federal government, in many cases it makes sense, particularly for Wuhan province. Yes, we are seeing that indeed.
Now, I made a list, and I went over it with Chuck Todd, of winners and losers should domestic transfer occur in the United States. The indoor things and people win. Amazon, UPS, Netflix, Big Pharma, TV, radio, Google, Apple. The losers would be outdoor things and crowds, malls, sporting events, retail, politics, people going door to door. Have you begun to see any indication of those sorts of winners and losers sorting themselves out in the United States, or are we still on standby for a domestic-to-domestic transmission?
I absolutely believe that the winners you listed are absolutely winners already in this situation. I'm not sure that the losers have taken their spot on the rankings yet. I think that, in many of these situations, we do see situations when authorities do ask people to avoid public spaces and avoid public gatherings. We've certainly seen that in China already, and we have seen that in the United States in the past. Again, we just aren't at that point yet in the U.S. where you're going to see people hiding in their houses.
Emily Baumgaertner, how do you believe the Chinese response has been? Do you trust the news? I read the South China Morning Post. I read I read everything I can. I just don't know what I can trust from the PRC.
Right now, it seems like the information coming out of China is better than what we saw during SARS. As I'm sure you're aware, in 2002 to 2003, the information regarding the contacts, tracing, the case counts, all of those things were incredibly low compared to reality. And the Chinese government ultimately came out and said that those numbers had not been representative. So it appears that things are going better this time, and the WHO and their researchers have been welcomed into the country. That being said, there is always a question of whether there's a disconnect in information from the local provinces to the central government in China. So most officials will agree that the case counts you're seeing are probably a bit lower than what's true.
I'm talking with Emily Baumgaertner, the medical reporter of the Los Angeles Times. Follow her on Twitter at Emily_Baum, B-A-U-M. She's really good at this. I asked Dr. Adalja what people should read. He read he noted The Coming Plague by Laurie Garrett and the Deadliest Enemy, another big book on viruses. How are you getting your reporting? Who are you talking to? What are your sources?
Right now, I'm talking mostly to folks at institutions across the United States and in China who have a history of tracing and modeling epidemics. There are a lot of mathematical modelings that can actually show you where this is likely to go and how quickly it's likely to go there. Of course, there are complications that experts at Johns Hopkins and Georgetown and the CDC are running into, such as an unlikely denominator. So if they don't know how many cases there are, it's hard to see how quickly it's spreading and how efficiently transmission will occur if it were to occur in the United States.
What's your reporting on the best estimate of the R0 for this virus at this point?
Right now, I'm hearing 2.6 pretty consistently. Again, R0 is based a lot on the denominator. So for those who are unaware, R0 is a representation of the reproductive rate, or how many people will be infected by every one case of this disease. So for something like measles, you're going to infect 12 to 18 people. It's incredibly infectious. With the seasonal flu, it can be as low as 1. And if a disease has an R0 lower than 1, it's actually going to peter out. But with something like this, we're looking at probably somewhere between 2 and 3.5. So it means that cases are continuing to rise, certainly.
1 minute. Give us the worst case, not World War Z, but what do you think is the worst case for the United States, Emily?
Sure. Realistically, the worst case is that it continues to spread out of control. We see human-to-human transmission sustaining itself in the United States. And if you play that out for months and years, what we're talking about is a situation where this becomes something that circulates regularly and widely around the world, including the United States. That's what we saw with H1N1, the swine flu in 2009, and now you're seeing that come around the world every single year. This coronavirus could absolutely, realistically join the ranks of things that we are constantly battling for decades, and it's something that we don't have our vaccine against yet. So it is a real, real threat.
Emily Baumgaertner, thank you, medical reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Follow her on Twitter at Emily_Baum, B-A-U-M. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Don't sleep in the subway, Dwayne. And thanks all of you for listening. I'll be back tomorrow. The Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show is never to be missed. We are on top of the news, and I think it might be acquittal day tomorrow as well for President Donald Trump. January 31. That would be good. Do not play cards with Mitch McConnell. I'll be back tomorrow, America, on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.